Did I get it? I don't know. But what I did get is cold feet. No, seriously. Hello everyone. This is your friend Carlz with another week of comic book talk. It's pretty cold and the mood's be down. Everything is down. Everything is lower and sadder. Part of me likes it that way, but it's not too good for the soul. Good for the heart. It makes you like feel stuff, but not so much for the soul or the brain. So it's hard to talk about stuff. You know what I mean? But anyways, comics don't stop for your mood, so you gotta talk about them. Well, everybody's talking about Superman, the new annual where they're gonna do the whole King Omega storyline. It's like really curious because apparently I'm not that much of an expert in Superman, but apparently he's never been this powerful, like a godlike entity. And we're finally gonna know what happened to him after DC's KO. Meanwhile, I'm gonna talk about it later. We are having a great run of Superman all across the super books because he lives. You know, it happened similarly when he died. You have a bunch of really fun books before he comes back, and well, eventually he will. So, but anyways, not so much in the news side of things. Everything seems to be always pushing towards the movies and everything. Well, Daredevil's been great. So if you like superheroes, there's always something to watch. So this week turned out to be, how can you say it, like when something happens like out of mere like happenstance is a word, right? Something that just happens by like it's because it's not a causality, right? Well, what do I know? But the thing is, turns out that I could have talked about many more horror-centered books from the week. I didn't, but as I was choosing what I was interested about this week, everything turned into horror for some reason. I could have talked about the new Frankenstein book in the world of Hellboy. I forgot about Hellboy. Or like the Phantom of the Opera, the issue number 3. It's been quite interesting. But anyways, there was enough horror. I think the beauty, the series that began in Image is still going also in another publisher, but I kind of lost track of it, and it got a little bit repetitive. But those first volumes of the beauty were great. I'm not even sure, like that live action thing they got from the beauty. I'm not even sure how does that fit anywhere, to be honest. But it's a thing, the beauty. But anyways, let's go right into this week's comic books. So, bear in mind everything is horror coded, but not that much. In the current storyline of Absolute Wonder Woman, where we were introduced to Absolute Satana, it's been fun as always. Right? They have exploited the magic side, which I've been quite vocal about it, and how I love that this version of Wonder Woman is like straight up magic based, and it gives the whole Absolute Wonder Woman world a whole different vibe, a whole different feeling. It's not about Themyscira. I don't know Greek. It's not only about Themyscira, but about her magic roots. The thing that is drawing me even further in, and it's something that is unrelated to the book, but Kelly Thompson, the writer, recently said on an interview something that was really interesting, and it gave me a lot of perspective. And it's something that I don't usually look for much in books because I kind of like don't have the satellite, like the radar for it. But she said that in her mind she was writing Absolute Wonder Woman as a queer character, which blew my mind because it made so much sense. And it's something that in a way you never really think about with regular Wonder Woman by now. Like it's not about everything, like thinking about the regular Wonder Woman as a sex symbol or anything, but she's just like a male fantasy sometimes. Of course, she's come into her own, but it was always like that. And I didn't even think about that role for Absolute Wonder Woman. But the author saying that she's writing her queer, it's an eye opener. Because the way she interacts with other characters with a degree of innocence, which is the appropriate innocence of someone who didn't grow up with traditional gender roles. So it makes this new volume a whole, and it gives it a whole different vibe. The way she interacts, especially with Satana, it's been interesting and really smartly done, and it absolutely fits with her character and this sort of duty-bound Wonder Woman, like the boiled down version of Wonder Woman in the Absolute version, just about business, you can say, but like a straightforward force of what? I wanted to say like force of justice, but that sounds way too corny. But anyways, it's a great moment to start reading Absolute Wonder Woman. This new storyline is only like 3 or 4 issues in, and this new dynamic is there. Well, the flip side of the whole story is that she kind of like let it known or heavily implied that DC was pushing back against it. And it seems weird, considering that they allow John Kent to be bisexual. Part of me thinks that, though, that they probably thought, let's make, or like the writers were like, let's make John Kent gay. And DC was like, no way, man. we draw the line at bi, okay? I don't know. But Absolute Wonder Woman keeps being an absolute delight, haha, as most of the Absolute titles have been. And as I said, it's horror coded to the core. The monsters, the magic, and now we're gonna see the quote-unquote new lasso in action. It's pretty great. And in the last issue, something really heartwarming happened, where like Satana goes, it seems like everybody loves her, something like that, or like she makes friends wherever she goes. And the Minotaur that she saved a couple of story arcs ago, it says something like, yeah, she's like that. And that was so heartwarming, so cute, and so just brings joy to your heart, man. Because among all the craziness, magic, and darkness, she's Wonder Woman. Next. Where's my button? Here. So a new book is coming out in Image called Corpse Night. Of course, it's just about some medieval revive, literally like a corpse. It's like magic, quests, whatever, man. Like, it sounds okay, but it apparently is written by the guy that wrote many of the Conjuring movies, which was the one thing that piqued my attention. I did an episode about the Conjuring, and I think they are not necessarily my favorite horror movies of recent days, but I think the Conjuring movies, they came full circle, right? With Last Rites, the final movie of. So the director, Michael Chavez, is going to be behind this book, and it's kind of like funny because I feel like The Conjuring did a full circle from horror into like this sort of romanticized family drama. The Last Rites, the last Conjuring movie, is so corny in the best way possible. like there was nothing more to do on the horror side. And of course they end up revealing what we all knew deep inside, that this movie was about the Warrens, it was about family, and it was about love. And I thought that twist for a horror movie was great. What does that have to do with this book Corpse Night by Image Comics? I don't know, but it's a good precedent. It gives you a great idea of how the narrative of the book could happen or could come to be. Then again, the Conjuring movies, the horror kind of like revolution that they, not revolution, but the revival they created when they came out with practical effects and closed kind of like settings. Conjuring 1 was just this one house. It's really hard to replicate in a book, but it's a good precedent of, as I said, how to tell a horror story with a soft text or with heart, basically. So I'm looking forward to this one. But also I like to say Michael Chavez. Next. As I said, more horror. As a way of talking about a little bit about the previous Event Horizon comic book, the prequel, I think the prequel book was okay, but it was mostly like a visual experience. Argument wise, I feel like there was no surprise and wasn't really that connected to the original movie, to the first movie. Kind of like I sort of expected to see some philosophical, theoretical connection that would embolden or like bring some extra heart to the original story, but it was just kind of like the same story. We saw a little bit of like the quote-unquote demon behind the whole Event Horizon thing, but it was mostly a visual thing. Most of the characters were traditional tropes and they end up in tropical. Is that a word? When something follows the trope, is it tropical? But they followed that pattern and basically it wasn't that surprising, but visually it was stunning. So now IDW Dark is bringing another Event Horizon book. It's called Event Horizon Inferno, which is now a sequel, sort of, yeah. And I don't know, this thing makes me think about, can you say lorify? When you take something and like just expand the lore. For some reason, when I think about expanding the lore of a movie or a book or something that happened in just a moment in time, I always think about the Independence Day, the sequel. What is the name? It probably has some like stupid name like Independence Day Resurgence, something, reshoot, right? And I thought that movie was okay. I didn't think it was that bad. But what really triggered me in a strange way was this expansion of the lore. And why did it trigger me? Because I felt it unnecessary. Even though it was obvious. Like, obviously, after the events of the first Independence Day movie, obviously they would create a task force to deal with newer alien incursions. Obviously they would experiment on the guns and on the weapons they recover from the aliens. Obviously all of that would be obvious that it would happen, but for some reason being it brought to existence made me think like, yeah, I really didn't want this, like I didn't need this expansion of the lore. That shows you not necessarily the poor decisions of expanding the lore of a fictional universe, but of the greatness of the original work. Like, you don't need anymore. And it's funny. It's funny because when I was a kid, I loved Independence Day, and the airplanes and the dog fighting, like everything. But well, it makes you wonder. Do you want expanded lore for all of these things? And that's basically what Event Horizon is doing, or what IDW is doing with the Event Horizon franchise. At least it's in comic book form, so it's not gonna be that impactful. But anyways, Event Horizon Inferno. Maybe that's the Independence Day sequel name. Independence Day Inferno. Next. So I wasn't that big of a fan of Head Lopper, the horror comic book published by Image Comics by Andrew McLean and Jodie Blair. I like that name, Jodie. So it was about I don't know how you say horror comedy with confidence, because those are two of the hardest genres to fulfill. And Headlopper, to me, felt like right in the middle. This story of kind of like vengeance and adventure, and this Viking carrying basically like a stand-up comedian's head, but it was a witch. I honestly kind of forgot the story of the original Headlopper, so now it's coming back with a new story, and it's kind of like promising basically more of the hijinks of horror comedy. But I keep getting stuck on that concept because I don't remember ever laughing with the original Headlopper. I love the art, that kind of like Adventure Time-ish style of cartoons. I like the art, and I thought it was kind of like endearing. But reading the press release and like seeing people talk about horror comedy, it just talks with me. What does it really mean? But anyways, if I'm recommending Headlopper, because ultimately what I remember about the first run of Headlopper, it was that it was cute, it was endearing, and I remember having some really, not necessarily comedic, but really charismatic moments between the main character and his beloved head. I don't remember it being that violent, that horror coded, that comedy coded, but it's a curious experiment. And if it's by mere curiosity that you can grab this book, I think it's more than enough. So Headlopper is coming with a new adventure, and I'm gonna pick it up maybe just by mere curiosity. Because as I said, even though it was critically acclaimed, I wasn't the biggest fan. Perhaps because I expected too much. As I said, horror comedy, I expected to laugh, and well, I don't get really scared or horrified by comic books. But for example, when I think about horror in comic books and it's well done, I think about that Ram book with Felipe Andrade. Oh fuck, I forgot the name of the demon chef. Whatever, man. You guys know. You guys know that book. Fuck, I'm gonna Google it, man. Felipe Andrade. Rare Flavors. Thank you. I think about Rare Flavors when I think about good comic book horror. It's just that breaking of the normal. Like everything seems so normal, and you bring something freaky that mixes perfectly the visuals of a comic book, that cartoonish style, with a story and the violence and disruption of horror to the main story. Rare Flavors was a rare book, and it was brilliant. But anyways, I didn't feel that with Headlopper. Next. More horror. This new book, In Your Skin, published by Image Comics. Why did it pick my attention? Not knowing anything about the author or anything. It's just that it used the how can you call it, it's not the flavor of the month, but it's something that I personally love, and a subgenre of horror that I personally enjoy, and it has been kind of like really strong in the mainstream media thanks to the substance, and it's body horror. So apparently, this new body horror book is deeply ingrained into southeastern Indian. I don't want to fuck it up, but it's it's in Bollywood. So can I just call that Indian culture? Would that be offensive? But anyways, it's a story about Bollywood, about for like not forgotten, but like forbidden relationships, and you start reading that synopsis, and it's like okay, and sometimes it says like it's body horror. Okay, so we're gonna get some of that substance flair, and it's no kind of like mystery, being that it's centered in the entertainment industry of India, of course, but and it's called In Your Skin, so it's given a lot of substance and David Cronenberg-ish style, and I can't imagine for the life of me Indian coded Cronenberg-ish style story like that goes way above my head, but it might be awesome. So there's nothing much to say. I have no expectations or any idea of what I'm getting with In Your Skin. But as I said, I'm a body horror enthusiast. So let's get to it. In Your Skin by Image Comics. Next. This is, without a shadow of a doubt, the book of the week. The new storyline for 10 years strong ongoing Monstress by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. Man, it's been a trip. The other day I was thinking about Monstress and about following since the beginning. I remember being really in love with Sana Takeda's art style. I think it has gone up and down throughout these 10 years of Monstress. I think it began really strong, and I'm not, as I said, I apologize. I'm not anyone to say like the art is bad or anything, but I think it has gone in a different direction. But anyways, I really thought Monstress was gonna end once Micah got all of her, like, I don't want to spoil anything, but once Micah got all of her clashes, all of her like kind of like she faced all of the elements that made her a dramatic character, like family, the Jin side, the necromancer side, the war, all of her adopted parents. Like that's a real a thing really worth mentioning. Like Micah, the protagonist of Monstress, has so many father and mother figures. It's amazing, but it makes up for her character, that really unstable emotionally and mentally of a character. But anyways, in this new story arc, the real curiosity for me is like, I don't want Monstress to become Spawn. Like I don't want it to be lacking a direction. I hope that they are bringing it to a close. I really am, because when you start sort of forgetting what's going on in a book, it talks about the book's I don't want to say become stale or anything, but it feels like the cycle is gone through. Like the more dramatic cycles, the ups and downs of a dramatic story have already happened. Like already facing this enemy, already accomplishing this, already achieving this. So I'm not gonna spoil it, but the end of the last story arc had a little bit of a switcheroo, bringing Kippa, the fox, into a more not necessarily important, but it gave Kippa a role to bring some humanity and to switch a little bit places between basically the both main characters, Micah and Kippa. They kind of like switched, and they are both carrying different torches in the story as far as humanity goes, and as far as like evil goes. So they did a little bit of switcheroo, and it felt kind of like fresh. But the story is getting way too big, way too convoluted, and all the factions are already there, and it's getting too big. It's getting too big, and it's getting sort of hard to follow. I end up focusing mostly on the main characters, Micah and Kippa, and like a little bit of the satellite main characters. But like, it's getting too big. I don't want to say I want it to end, but maybe streamline it a little bit more. I don't know. Who am I to criticize Monstress? That's the thing, but that's how I feel about it. Basically, I feel like it's getting too big, and I feel like it's not taking me into this shocking, violent, emotional ride that Monstress was at its prime. I don't want to imply that it's not at its prime, but to me, maybe it's not. But anyways, finally Monstress is back. Happy 10th anniversary. 10 fucking years, man. I think that is what shocked me the most. Having followed this book for so long. And it's not like fucking manga, you know, like manga comes so often and it lasts so long that it's really in these type of comic books. It's like really shocking. They don't last this long. And well, you can argue what are the reasons, but to me it's because they make better stories. Sorry. They make better stories because, and this is why I'm talking about Monstress ending. They make better stories because the cycles of beginnings and ends are better. You know, you can always keep recycling and respawning tropes in some genres, but you can only do it so much before it gets old. So anyways, Monstress number 61, The Return. Next. So I got this spoiled. I'm one issue behind in the whole Dead Spiral thing. The current ongoing event between Spider-Man and Venom. And it's already out of the bag. It's no spoiler. It's been everywhere, talked everywhere, shared everywhere, in Marvel, socials, everywhere. Peter Parker is the new host for the Carnage symbiote. I have mixed feelings about it because, as I said repeatedly, I wasn't that much of a fan of Dead Spiral. I felt like it was just this big setup for this big reveal. They even did the switcheroo of making you think that the bad guy, whatever his name was, fucking like guy that came out of nowhere, he was going to be the next Carnage. And like, well, lo and behold, it's gonna be Peter. But anyways, I think that the one element about this crossover that I rescued the most is a curious one, because I think that out of all the things that have happened symbiote wise the past, like, since the King in Black event, because the whole story arc of Eddie Brock being God and meeting his past and present forms, it was fun. It was fun, but it didn't feel that important. I think the biggest winner, and of course I've said that I like Venom a lot, and I've liked the dynamic they created between the Venom symbiote and Mary Jane, and I hope it remains there for a little bit longer. The biggest winner was the Carnage symbiote. Since leaving Cletus Cassidy, I think the Carnage symbiote has become like a really interesting character overall. The way he interacts, or it interacts with its host, and how it sort of reflects what they are in a really peculiar way. It has become something bigger than just a monster or just like a serial killer thing. Like, the Carnage symbiote has become a really interesting platform to make you think about characters. That is the one thing you can kind of like rescue and appreciate from the current Eddie Brock Carnage. the recently, obviously ending volume right now. The way Carnage played with Eddie Brock's psyche was really interesting. Like, even though they appear to be equals, he always was one step further. It was really smartly written, and the content and sort of like emotional and psychic things that were implied in their interaction were great. So that's the big winner out of all of this is the Carnage symbiote, and we'll see what they're gonna do with it now. You know, I'm not that excited, but I'm curious. Next. So the Superman Spider-Man book was really interesting. It had really fun stories. Ironically, maybe my favorite was the one between Power Girl and the Punisher. It was curious, but it wasn't that intense enough. It wasn't that emotional enough. I was craving it. So now in Spider-Man Superman, um, we have a new batch of creators giving it a shot, and like I I really wanted to be moved by the crossover, and I don't know. I don't want to make like newer expectations or whatever, but like fuck it. It remains something really interesting, something really unique, and something that they won't fuck it up. They are definitely capturing both of these characters in this crossover, as they didn't do as much in the Batman Deadpool. I've said it before. Like, I wasn't a fan of that one. So give you a little bit more of the good stuff. It's not like the groundbreaking stuff. It's not revolutionary stuff. It's just some good stuff. Some isolated good stories. And I'm not gonna lie, I just said that I don't wanna get so many expectations on it, but like, I wanna be moved. Do it. Do it now. Move me. Book. Next. This is a curious one. The Spider-versity has Norman Osborn training some spider people, which is weird because they shows a couple of characters that makes sense, especially the new Spider Girl and the new Spider Boy, which are freshly new characters. But Anya Corazon, which it's kind of like an old character, and you keep forgetting about her. And I think actually she became kind of like one of the guardians of the Web of Destiny or something like, right? And then you have Silk and Ghost Spider. Silk has been one strange phenomena over the years. We often forget that she exists. Basically, she entered the world of Spider-Man in such a strong way. Just the other day, I was reviewing the Amazing Spider-Man. What was it? 2013, I think. That because I was looking at some of Humberto Ramos's art from that era where Silk was introduced, and I remember that introduction to Silk where like since she was beaten by the same spider as Peter, they were like attracted naturally. That is one of the funniest introductions to a new character, because what is the first thing they do? They fuck. It was so funny, and you keep remembering that it's like she comes out of her prison naked. She creates a suit out of webbing, and then she gets like pheromonically, biologically, organically attracted to Peter, and they fuck. And since then she's been always there, but like even in her solo series when they made her like a reporter, they brought back her brother, they have some family drama, right? She's been like a mid character, so I'm not surprised about seeing her here, but I just want to see her used properly. You can't just go around and say like, oh, like she really needs training. Then we get to Ghost Spider. Ghost Spider is not a new Spider, we already like are like it feels like she came out on the scene like 30 years ago by now. After the massive hit of the Spider-Verse movies, it feels like Spider-Gwen or Ghost Spider has been here forever. But they created an interesting connection between Ghost Spider and Norman Osborn. They sort of planted this sequence of events in which when Stacy becomes the Green Goblin in more than one reality, I'm pretty sure. So Gwen has become haunted by her own demons in this way. They have exploited that. They have created a really interesting and peculiar relationship between Gwen and Norman, especially because he actually murders her in so many universes, right? So they have this really interesting and relationship. This book could have been only about the two of them, and it would have been great. But the final member of this story is Miles, and that is the one that triggers me the most. I feel like if one Spider person has come into his own, and it's really not a rookie, like definitely not a rookie anymore, is Miles. Miles has become progressively one of the most interesting, fun, heartwarming, and complete Spider people of them all. Like, right below Peter, you have Miles. They have crafted his story, his world, his emotions, his relationships in a way that made him whole. And now he has his own stories. What the fuck is he doing here? Like, maybe he's gonna be a teacher, I don't know. But anyways, it's a great mix of Spider characters. Some of them more interesting than others. Spider-Girl and Spider-Boy, to me, their own books were mid as fuck. I don't want to sound mean, but like, Dan Slott came and created a Spider-Boy just because, and that argument that he was quote unquote forgotten by everybody. That shit was so funny. And we'll see, man. Any Spider crossover is a worthy crossover. And next, final but not final, what is? Last but not least, I keep forgetting. Just a quick reminder about the ongoing story in the reign of the Superboys. This is a storyline worth getting in. What they're doing with Superboy Prime, it's amazing. They went heavy and deep in the kind of like sort of a mix between commentary and lore, because we know that Prime is like a normal guy who got his powers from comic books or like whatever the case. They have been leaning hard into that fact that he knows comics books, and they went meta in the last. I think was it Superman or was. I think it was one of the super books. Like they're doing the storyline, the reign of the Superboys, throughout many of the books. It was in one of those where he went deep meta. I think now he works in a comic book shop out of all places. And what that has created is a sort of commentary that we often forget how Prime was so important for the crisis. And we often forget that he was just a guy. We often forget that he was just a guy, and his arrogance, all of his evilness, you could say, it comes from a place that we all share. You know, sort of making that meta commentary, it made me think about fandoms, it made me think about toxic culture, it made me think about so many things concerning reality. When they brought him back, and they ended up that KO issue with Lois, bringing them to the Kents, right? In a clearly effort by Lois to make him more, not human. Human is not the word, but make him more like Clark, right? To teach them the values that made Clark Superman. And the contrast is really heavy there because Prime wants to be as good as Superman, but he's already a fully developed adult, and his development is deeply tied to the fictional world of comic books. So you see how that dynamic works. How can you imprint or like import the values of Superman, who is a fictional character in Prime's mind? How do you translate that? That is basically most of us reading these comics, living in this fictional world, and having that experience, that meta experience of reading fiction whilst at the same time trying to make them make sense and bring the riches of it to our own lives. So they've been doing that with Prime, and it's been super interesting. And like, well, who knows what's going to happen? But it's definitely a really interesting storyline. It has been, beside fun, it's been really interesting, and the commentary is definitely there. Highly recommended. You do need to go back. I don't know if anyone reading these books skipped KO. I don't know if anyone who follows DC skipped KO. That's one of the things that you can't do if you follow DC. You can't skip events or like big events. This wasn't a crisis, but it was a big event, and there's no way you can skip it. So you probably are caught up. But if you thought about skipping the Superman books after Superman left at the end of DC's KO, you are fucking up, because it's been great. Boom. And that's it for another week of comic books. Curiously horror oriented, a bunch of horror books slipped into the week's list. But anyways, that's just how it goes. Really looking forward to that Monstress, and just like clockwork, my fucking neighbor is like drilling some shit. So you're probably gonna get here at the end some of his drilling bullshit. But like, anyways, I don't think he cares about Superman. But I do, and hopefully you do as well, and you get something out of this week's picks to enjoy. Can you hear it? I hope you don't. But anyways, that's another week of comic books. That's it from me. Time to get some good vibes or some energy from somewhere to do my movie episode this week. I officially skipped last week just out of lack of energy, man. Like full on emo, but talking about comics has brought my hopes and my energies a little bit up. So if you happen to run into this episode and you enjoy it, thank you so much. Hope you enjoy your times with comic books as well. That's it for me. See you all next time. Bye bye.